Okay guys, this is your public service announcement to not take a regular pumpkin bread recipe and just swap out gluten-free flour. I got a method that is so much better and is going to change your life. I'll explain why in this video. First part is really simple. It's the streusel topping. You could do without it, but why not? Doesn't take very long. So you need 1/3 cup of brown sugar, a tablespoon of gluten-free flour, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/8 teaspoon of salt, and then 1.5 tablespoons of softened butter. And then I'm just gonna take a fork and kind of just mash that all together so it's nice and blended and clumpy. And then we're just gonna set it aside while we make our pumpkin bread batter. First of all, the pumpkin you use, the canned pumpkin you use, makes a huge difference. I highly recommend Libby's canned pumpkin, not pumpkin pie filling, just canned pumpkin, because it has less moisture in it. It's just a thicker consistency. And gluten-free flour has a harder time absorbing moisture. Here's when things get a little crazy. We're going to cook down the pumpkin first. So in a large saucepan, we're going to mix up the whole bread in this saucepan. So get a large saucepan so you could just add everything to it. Add an entire can of Libby's canned pumpkin. And then to that, we're gonna add the spices. So 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and then 1/8 teaspoon of ground cloves. Lastly, a teaspoon of salt. Just cook and stir this over medium heat for, I would say, about 7 or 8 minutes. What's happening here is we're cooking off some of the water and concentrating the pumpkin flavors. So we still get all the pumpkin vibes, but we're not gonna get a real dense, gummy loaf. We're shooting for something fluffy and light, but still really moist. After about 7 or 8 minutes, it's not gonna look hugely different, but you will notice it's a little thicker. Okay, I'm gonna remove this from the heat. To this, we're gonna add 4 ounces of softened cream cheese. The softened cream cheese, yes, a little unconventional, but why I do that is because pumpkin bread has a lot of oil in it. I don't wanna add that much oil because the gluten-free starches are not gonna absorb all that oil. So instead I swap some of it out with cream cheese, which builds structure, adds fat, and we can lessen the amount of oil. Now, here's where the comments are gonna be coming rolling in. Remember, this is 2 loaves of pumpkin bread we're making here. So 1 cup of brown sugar and 1 cup of granulated sugar. And yes, that is a lot of sugar. But you know what? You could always cut back on the sugar. Don't cut back too much because then you'll lose some of the moisture of the bread. But if you wanna adjust the sugar amount, you do you. The mixture is still warm at this point, so the cream cheese will melt down into the warm pumpkin and just whisk all of that together until it is smooth. You gotta kind of use a little bit of vigorousness with this just to break up all that cream cheese. It's okay if there's a little bit of clumps. It's not gonna affect anything. Once it bakes, it'll all kind of meld in. To that, let's add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 1/2 cup of oil, any oil that you prefer. This is vegetable oil. 1/4 cup of milk, any milk you prefer. And then 4 eggs. Remember, we're making 2 loaves of pumpkin bread. Then just give it another whisk to combine, and we're ready for our dry ingredients. So you'll need 2.5 cups of gluten-free flour. I use cup for cup gluten-free flour. This recipe is pretty forgiving if you have another preferred gluten-free flour. I do find that cup for cup has a softer, fluffier texture. So if you haven't tried it, I recommend giving it a try. 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and then 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And that's it for the bread batter. Just stir that all to combine. You just want to stir until you don't see any flour anymore. Mix it by hand. So really easy, just all comes together in a saucepan. The size of your pan matters, especially when you're making quick breads. If your breads have a tendency to be really flat, I'm guessing that your pan is too big. Now for this recipe, I recommend an 8.5 by 4.5. You don't have to do this part. I like to do it because I like to be able to lift my bread out, especially when it has has a streusel topping on it. So I just sprayed nonstick spray on it and then put a piece of parchment along the bottom. And then the overhangs are where you're gonna lift it out. Just smooth the top once the batter is evenly divided. Then you just divide up the streusel topping between the 2 loaf pans. Just clump it up and sprinkle it on top. If you decide to forego the streusel topping, you would just bake it right away. Or if you have coarse sugar, then sometimes I'll just sprinkle that on top too, or you could do a cinnamon sugar mixture. Some other add-ins, of course, nuts would be good in here. You could do a pumpkin chocolate chip loaf, dried cranberries or dried raisins would be good, pepitas. If you want some extra insurance to have a nice domed fluffy loaf, then at this point I would let the batter sit for about 10 minutes. It just gives some extra time for the gluten-free starches to soak up all that moisture and hydrate them, and then put it in the oven, a 350 oven, for about 50 to 54 minutes. You'll want to use a long skewer or cake tester or toothpick and just make sure that it's baked in the middle before you pull it out. Of course, you can bake one, eat one, give the other one to a friend or neighbor. Feeling stingy, then freeze the other loaf. This bread will stay good about 1 to 2 days. Gluten-free breads kind of lose moisture quickly, so I don't recommend storing it longer than that. If you want to enjoy it longer, then what I do is I just slice it and I'll put it in a Ziploc freezer bag and just pull out slices as needed. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.